Hi guys, welcome in that quick start video where we will show you how to download, install and make your first crowd from simulation to rendering. First, you need to download the Golem package and the Golem assets to get started with that quick start video. So you need to go into the golem.com website, then into the download section. It will ask you a couple of information, and as soon as you press the Try Golem button, you receive an email with the links for the Golem plugin package and the Golem assets package. The Golem plugin is a Maya plugin, and the assets are a couple of ready-to-use characters, animations, and scenes that you can just play with and get started with. And in this video, I will use those Golem assets to show you the process of making your first simulation. Once the Golem package is installed, you can open Maya and you need to load the plugin through the plugin window. So you need to go into the Windows menu, Setting Preference, Plugin Manager, and you'll get a section with glmcrowd.mll, which is the Golem plugin here. You need to load it, and as soon as it's loaded, you can check its version here. If you need help for the installation process, you can go to install.golem.com, which is also here. It gives you a really comprehensive step-by-step tutorials about how to install both the package, both the assets, and also the license. As soon as the plugin is loaded, you should get a new shelf into Maya, which is the Golem shelf, as well as two menus, the Golem menu, which is for the simulation, and the Golem render menu, which is for layout and rendering of your crowds. First, we can start by checking the license. So if you go into the Golem menu, into the About section, it opens a small window where you can see what is the status of your license. So right now I'm running a Golem 7 full license, and right after is the time for which your license is remaining. So right now this one is permanent, but you may also have a couple of days written here. You can check for a new version by pressing that button. It will bring you on the website and tell you if there's a new version available. And you can also check for the release notes, so it means that for every single version you can know what's been fixed and what's been added. Please notice that right now I'm running a permanent license, but if you're using Golem for the first time and you haven't bought any license, you may have a PLE license, which means Personal Learning Edition. It means that you get all the same features than the full license, except that all the scenes that you're going to do and render will be watermarked and they will be contaminated. So as soon as you save a scene, a Maya scene with a PLE license, this scene will always be contaminated with a PLE license. There are quick ways to know that you are running a PLE version of Golem. One is whenever you're going to load the plugin, you'll get that in-view message, and as soon as you move the mouse, it will disappear. If you look into the shelf, at the end of the shelf, you'll get that locker icon here with PLE written on it. And if you go into the About menu here, you'll get the fact that you're running a Golem 7 Personal Learning Edition license, which is going to expire in the infinite number of days. It's also written into the script editor. If you open the script editor, it tells here as a warning that no Golem crowd layout commercials license has been found. So instead, you are running a Golem Personal Learning Edition. So make sure not to save production scenes with a PLE, else it will be contaminated and watermarked. The watermark, you can get the data and the information about the PLE license on ple.golem.com. It looks like this. Some random meshes will be randomly shaded with an orange shader. So you want to make sure that none of your production scenes will be contaminated by this PLE license. So let's get started with the full license here and check if everything is set properly into Maya. So within the Golem shelf, you can click on the first button here, and that one checks the settings for Maya. As Golem is a simulation engine, it needs some of the options from Maya to be set in a specific way. So this one I turn it off on purpose, you want to make sure that the playback speed is set to play every frame, and if it's not, you have a small note next to it and a help link, so you can click on that link that will bring you back onto the documentation and tells you how to fix this. So for this specific problem, I can just go into the time frame here, go into playback speed and say I want to play every frame free or every frame max real time. And as soon as I fix this and I open that window, now everything turns as yes. So you really want to make sure that everything here says yes before making any scenes. So okay, let's make our first scene. First, we'd like to define what's going to be the terrain for the crowd, on which terrain they're going to be adapted. So I can click onto that button here, which is the terrain locator. As soon as I click on it, it creates a new group, and within that group, there's a new node called the terrain node. If we take a look at the attribute editor of that terrain node, it has ground adaptation attribute, so on which geometry or how does the ground adaptation will look like for my characters. It has navigation attributes, but we're going to skip that into that quick start video. So here it tells that the ground mode is the default plane. So by default, entities will consider that there's an infinite plane at 8,0, on which they're going to need to adapt. I can also say I want to use a Maya geometry, and I can connect Maya geometry if I want to, but here I'm going to stick with the default plane. Then I need to define what type of entities I will have into my scene. Depending on what you're doing, you may need to import, I don't know, man characters, woman characters, maybe soldiers, maybe horses, maybe cars. So for each of those type of entities, you need to import a Golem character file. Into this video, we'll use already made character files, but we got plenty of tutorials to show you how to import your own Maya characters as a Golem character. To create a new entity, I need to click onto that button here where I can see the white character and the orange character. You can see the pop-up message says it's an entity type node to create an entity type. So I'm going to click on that button once. It's going to prompt me to load a GCHA file, which stands for Golem character. And here I'm going to use from the character pack. So if you jump into where the characters pack has been installed, into the Golem folder and into the characters subfolder, you find a couple of predefined characters. For that quick start video, I will just use the Casual Man Light Golem character version, which is just a lighter version of the Casual Man here. So it just has less assets. So I'm gonna open that one. It's gonna ask me to load the shaders. So please remember that the Golem character file just has information about the skeleton, the geometry, and the skinning, but it doesn't have any information about shaders. So we need to load an extra file which has the shaders in it to be able to render that properly with all the shaders. As I'm gonna use Arnold, I want to go into the character pack directory, Golem folder, shaders subfolder, and as I imported a Casual Man Light and I want to use Arnold, I'm gonna bring the Casual Man Light underscore AR for Arnold to my scene. So you got one for 3D Light, Mental Ray, Render Man, Redshift, and V-Ray. So I'm gonna import that file here. It's gonna be imported in the middle of my scene, and so that's just my Luke Dev character with all the shaders in it. But it could also be a sphere with all the shaders in it. As soon as the shader exists and are active, they'll be applied to my character. So make sure not to hide that character, because if it's hidden, Arnold will consider that the shaders which are held by that character does not need to be exported. So we need to keep him in the scene, but here to make sure that it doesn't appear when we're gonna render, we just turn off the primary visibility of all the meshes. So we just turn off primary visibility, so it won't appear at rendering type, but still it'll be there, and the shaders which are attached to that geometry will be exported. Okay, next step is to place and define how many characters and where are they going to be. So define the initial position and the number of my characters. So for that I can use the population tool. which is that icon here, which looks like a particle system. And as it's a tool, I need to double click on it to bring the tool settings. So the population tool allows you to draw different shapes or connect to some geometries to generate zones of initialization for your entities. Here I'm going to stick with the grid, and I'm going to place my grid locator somewhere in my scene. So as soon as I create and click into the viewport, it creates a new group here, GLM population. I can open it, and you can see it has a red node which corresponds to my red locator here. And as soon as I select it, I get some options. So how many slots I would like to have onto my character. So let's make a 10 by 10 column and rows grid here. I can also change the distance between my characters. To make it more organic, I can noise that distance. I can also change the orientation for my characters, and I can also noise that orientation to make sure that they are not all looking into the same direction. And whenever I'm happy with this, I just press the create button. When I press the create button, it creates new nodes, a particle system, and a crowd field. And if I rewind back the simulation to frame 1 here, and I play a couple of frames, I will get my characters popping into the right orientation and at the right position, which is defined by my population tool. So just if that step here, when you launch a couple of frames and you don't see your character, if that doesn't work, one good practice is to go back into the scene settings, and into the scene settings, as soon as you create a new simulation into your scene, you get more checkers, like is the unit adapted, do you have like a particle system, a crowd field. So it's a good way to check what's wrong. And if there is a no somewhere, once again you get a help link to show you what step you may have missed. So okay, I'm kind of happy with that. So what you see here is just one node here being displayed. It's that node there, and what you see here is not actual Maya geometry. It's not really possible to have interactive Maya when you got thousands of characters. So we have a own way to draw geometry, which is handled by, for each type, by its node. So every time you're going to create new man characters, the display of those characters will be handled by that node here. So all you see here is some GPU geometry, and everything you see in the viewport is what you will get at rendering time. You may see some characters have geometry variation because we've been defining some geometry variation into the character file. Some characters you can see the skinning, which is working properly into the viewport. There's just one thing which is not being displayed correctly into the viewport. It's the shading variation. You can see all the characters, they wear the same blue t-shirts, but if you've defined some shading variation, at rendering time you will have a different result. The main reason for that is on GPU it's really hard to load plenty of textures, and it's quite hard to evaluate Arnold shading graph or Mentor Ray or V-Ray or Redshift shading graphs. So what we do is we just look at what's the first texture we can find into the shading graph for each mesh, and we just apply that to every single character. But obviously at rendering time here, the t-shirt will be different. So let's have a quick word about geometry variation. You can see some characters have short pants, long pants, some characters have sweatshirt, t-shirt. So you can just, if you want to change that, you can go back into your entity type here, and next to where you've been loading the character file, you can click on that button here, and that will open the character maker with the right file being loaded into it. So the character maker can also be accessed from the shelf with that icon here, but by using the button it opens the tool with the right file loaded, so it's one step less and helps you getting faster. We won't detail what's going on into that tool, but you can see here, as soon as I loaded the file, I have access to two tabs, the skeleton tab and the geometry tab. Into that geometry tab, we've been defining some variation for the crowd man light assets. So there's one variation here, which is the undercoat variation, which can be either a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, there's also a variation there for the pants, which can be either long pants or short pants. And I can decide how many characters will have each of those assets just by changing the sliders here. So as soon as I have a variation, I can control how much I would like to have. So I do have my undercoat group here, my pants group there. If I want to have more people with sweatshirt, I can just increase that slider here. And to make sure it's being applied to my simulation, I need to save that modification into that file. So I'm going to press the save button here, and I want to reload the simulation. So bring it back to the first frame and play a couple of frames to see that now there's more character with that sweatshirt. As Golem is simulation based, every time you do a modification, you need to go back into the first frame and then run a couple of frames to see what's the result of that. By the way, let's say you want to change how many characters you will have into your scene. You can go back into your pop tool. Obviously, you can change any of the properties you're having. Maybe we can change the distance. Maybe we can noise the distance more. Maybe we can add more lines, so we have now more people. And if you want this to be applied, you need to press the replace button to replace the previous node you've been created. So if you press replace here, now it's been replaced. And once again, if you want to see the result of that, you need to go back to the first frame and play a couple of frames and see what's going on. Okay, now we're quite good. Let's say we want to render this simulation. So if we want to render this, as I said, it's not Maya geometry, it's some GPU geometry we are drawing ourselves through the plugin. So if you want to be able to render the geometry, you need to use the Golem render proxy nodes. To generate the Golem render proxy node, you need to export the simulation. So I'm going to open the simulation exporter here, which has working characters next to a cache icon. So I can maybe save my scene first, so it will have a convenient name and everything working properly. So I'm going to save that as quick start. Okay, and I'm going to reset the properties here. So the simulation exporter bakes the result of the simulation as a simulation cache. That simulation cache won't have any geometry. It will be super light. It will just have information about bone rotation, position, and scales. And we'll have a render proxy node which will be able to generate the geometry on demand. So simulation exporter asks which crowd I would like to export. So right now I'm just having one group of crowds, so that's the one here. What's the name of the cache? What's the start frame? What's the end frame? So we're gonna just render the first 50 frames. What's the additional attributes you'd like to export? Where do you like to export the cache? And as soon as you press export, it will run the scene for you and export the result of the simulation as a Golem cache. When it's done, you may notice a couple of things here. So I can close the simulation exporter. You may notice that two nodes appeared in the scene. One is the cache proxy manager, and the other one is the cache proxy. So you may also notice that my timeline here becomes green from frame 1 to frame 50, which is where I've been exporting my cache. And finally, you may notice that that latest icon you have here is now highlighted, and it tells you that you're no more into simulation mode, you are in cache replay mode, which means that as soon as you are in cache replay mode, you can change the time as you'd like. So you don't need to go into frame 1 anymore and run a couple of frames to see what's going on. Now you can jump into any time you'd like to. But it also means that none of the modification you're going to do onto the simulation, let's say you change maybe the number of slots into your population tool, or you re-emit your particle, or you change your behaviors, you won't see any of those because you are in cache replay mode and you are not in simulation mode. If you want to go back into simulation mode, you just have to press that button here, and that button brings you to simulation mode. So the icon is slightly different. You can see behavior editor icon next to it, and now you can go back into your first frame and run a couple of frames to see what's going on. If you want to render your crowds, you need to be into cache replay mode. So every time you press onto that button, it just toggles the state between simulation and cache replay. So okay, I'm back into cache replay mode. Now I can change the time, and now my crowds are being handled and displayed by the cache proxy. So the cache proxy has the information about what's the current frame, where has been exported the cache, from which frame to what frame, and it also allows you to render. So to make sure that everything is proper for rendering, you can also use the check scene settings for rendering. So that guy here checks that everything which is required for rendering has been set properly. Once again, if one of those attributes is set to no, you have a help link next to it. You can click and see what's going on. So it tells me that I'm using Arnold here, 3.1, that this version of Arnold is currently supported by this version of Golem, that everything has been exported properly, that the shaders exist, and it should be okay. So that means that now I can go into the Arnold menu, I can create a light, and if I press into the render button here, I'll get my crowd entities being rendered properly. Here we go. So as I said, you can see my characters have some shading variation on the t-shirt. You can see they also have some shading variation on the pants. Some have white pants, some have jean pants, which are not really available into the viewport, but you can see the whole variation here. So, okay, that's pretty good. I was able to get my first crowd, but obviously I would like to animate those guys. So let's close that window and let's go back into simulation to add couple of behaviors to my crowd. So I'm no more into cache replay mode. My timeline is now all black. And if I want to add some behaviors to my entities, I need to jump into the behavior editor, which is that tool here. So the behavior editor allows you to assign behaviors and decide when does a behavior start and when does a behavior stop. So for that quick start video, we'll just let them play an animation. So the way it works is you got on the right side here your entity types. Right now I'm just having one, my casual man characters. If you double click on it, it opens the simulation state of your characters. So right now they're not doing anything. That's why they're playing that T-pose. So what I would like to do is drag and drop one of the behavior from the behavior library. So I'm going to use the third one, which is a motion behavior to allow playing an animation file on a character. So I can just drag and drop it, put it into the flow. As soon as in the right position, you can see the flow change colors. It's now yellow, and if I release, now you can see that's created a block, and that block is connected to that arrow. Let's say you haven't connected it properly, you can still at any time grab a block and put it into the arrow. And if you'd like to be able to unlink a block, you just have to press Alt, the Alt key on your keyboard, and grab your motion behavior or whatever behavior and remove it from the flow. So let's bring it back. Once again, that motion behavior is a Maya node. It has Maya attributes, so I can load a motion clip. There's a shortcut. If you double click onto a behavior node or locomotion node or any animation related node, it prompts you to load a motion file. So if you go into the character pack, into the Golem folder, into the motion subfolder, you got plenty of motions you can play with. So especially for human characters, there's the audience directory with plenty of stadium kind of motions, and also the locomotion behavior with a couple of cycles for turns, runs, and walk animations. Here I'm just going to go into the audience folder, and I can just grab some animation here. Let's say the stand angry, stand applause, stand watching, maybe some sit, like sit watching. So I can, with the control key pressed, I can multi-select multiple file here, press open, and you can see that now my behavior has 4 different motions here being assigned. And if I rewind back my simulation and play a couple of frames, you'll see that my characters will just decide randomly what animation they want to play, and they'll play it. So now I'm having my 4 different animations being scattered. even if there are 4 animations, you can still see that while the animation are really recognizable, the characters are moving the arms at the same time here. So if you want to have something more organic, you can go into your motion behavior here and change the start person, so at which frame the animation should start. So it's a start person, so it's between the beginning of the motion for 0 and 1 is the end of the animation, so it just allows to play any frame into that animation. We can also play with the speed ratio to randomize the speed at which one animation is played, so we can just slightly change that to have some characters playing it faster, some characters playing it slower, and have a different frame, and now you got something more organic. Once again, if you want to render this, you need to re-export the simulation because the simulation has changed. So if I go into cache replay mode here, it just plays the previous cache of my standing characters. So if I want to update this, I need to export once again my simulation. So whatever the state you are at, when you use the simulation exporter and you press export, it will make sure to go back into simulation mode first and then export the cache, and brings you back to cache replay mode right after. So now you can see I can jump into the time and see what's going on into my simulation, and I'm in cache replay mode, so that means that I can open my render view and render my crowds, and I'll get an updated rendering. And here we go. As you can see now, your characters are being rendered with the right posture, which corresponds to the animation they are playing. So the last step here is to apply some layout modification to the characters. So Golem comes with a really powerful layout tool, which allows you, once your simulation have been exported, to edit what's going on. So it allows you to change the character position, rotation, the scales, but also to duplicate a couple of characters or even change their postures or their mesh assignment. So to go into layout mode, you have to press F9 on your keyboard, which is the component mode for Maya. And as soon as you are in F9 mode, you can select a bunch of characters and they're going to be outlined in green. And you can apply deformers, such as you would apply any deformers on any Maya objects within Maya. So here I press W to get the translate tool, and I can just grab my characters and translate them wherever I want to. I can even use the E key to apply a rotation, or the scale tool with the R key to either scale the size of the characters, or if my tool settings are set up into word mode, when I'm going to scale distance between my characters. So I'm going to expand the distance between my characters. And I can do that for any group of characters. So let's say I want to select those bunch of guys here. Let me maybe hide the particles for now, for a sec. And I can grab that group of character here, bring my W translate key here and apply some modification. And everything I've been doing so far has been recorded into the layout tool. So you can open the layout tool here. So as soon as you're in cache replay, you got access to the layout tool. And that layout tool shows you what you've been doing from the beginning. So it's a nodal editor, and it shows you that first you selected a group of characters, which are here. So as soon as you click on the node, you can see which characters it's related to. You apply some translation of on X and Z that you can change through that attribute editor here. You apply some rotation here, you apply some scale to scale the characters, you apply some expand to change the distance between characters, then you change your selection and translate it to. You can at any time disable a node. You can say, okay, I don't want to scale my characters anymore, and as soon as I disable it, you can see my characters are no more bigger than they used to be. Or you can re-enable it. Or you can also say, okay, I don't want to apply that later part of the graph. I would like to see what's going on into that step. So you can either select that node here, click on set as root to say that you want to only evaluate that part, or press V when you have a node selected, like V like this, and it allows to change the route automatically and change what's being evaluated. So that layout tools allow you to change plenty of things. So you can see you got plenty of layers you can apply, such as a kill layer. So let's say I would like to kill a group of characters. I just have to select them. I just have to create a new selector node. As soon as my selection is being active into the viewport, my selector gets the ID of the character which gets related to the selection, and I can apply a kill node. I can use the middle click of my mouse to drag a link between my selector and the kill, and I can, with the V key or right click set as root, specify that now it's gonna be my new evaluation part of my graph. So you may have not noticed, but the characters here have disappeared. If I evaluate this, they're here. If I evaluate that, they're not here anymore. And if you want to connect those two parts of the graph here, you really like that part and you want to combine that with that part, it's as simple as drawing a link with the middle click button here from the end of your graph to your new part of your graph, and now the characters are being killed, but also the previous characters you've been changing have changed. You can even change your geometry assignment. So let's end up with this. I'm gonna reorganize my graph here properly, and I want to remove the sweatshirt from those guys, and I want to apply a t-shirt instead. So I want to select those guys. Even if my selection is not perfect, you can see that guy here in the background, it doesn't have a sweatshirt, but that doesn't make any difference. I'm gonna create a new selection here. I'm gonna connect it to the end of my flow, so now my selection becomes active, and I want to use the plus minus mesh asset here. So add remove mesh asset, and I want to connect it to my flow. As soon as it becomes active, I can decide which mesh I would like to add to my characters and which mesh I would like to remove. So first, the mesh I would like to remove is that sweatshirt. So I want to remove the sweatshirt, so I can press the add remove button here. I can see the list of all the meshes which are available for that character, and I want to say I don't want to have that sweatshirt anymore. So all the characters who had a sweatshirt, they don't have a sweatshirt anymore, but the t-shirt guy didn't have any sweatshirt, so not a problem. Which meshes I would like to add? I can use the add button here, and I can say I want to add a t-shirt mesh. Here the t-shirt is made, if I want my characters to be complete, right now they don't have forearms, so I also need to bring my forearms characters like the biceps meshes and press OK. Oops, sorry, I want to add another one into the list and say this is going to be the t-shirt and the forearm. And when I'm happy with that, whenever I'm happy with that, I press save here to save that file into my quick start. So let's save this. So that file is a JSON file. It will store all the layout operation. So it's important to remind that what I'm doing here is non-destructive. It's operations I'm applying on top of the simulation cache, which means if my cache changes and my characters walk instead of maybe being sit or watching the game, we'll apply the same modification but now on walking characters. So I'm going to save that, and as soon as this is saved, whenever I'm going to render my crowd, they'll be rendered with all the same modification being applied. So we got once again we got a video about the layout tool which shows you how it works and what's possible with that tool. So let's press render. Here we go. And now you can see all the modification being applied. The characters are now wearing a t-shirt here. Some characters have been deleted. Some characters have been moved down there. Some characters have been moved and oriented here. So all the layout modification that you applied are now reflected at rendering time, and it allows you to fix all your simulation results really quickly and in an artistic and interactive way. So I hope this video makes sense. Once you're happy with that quick start video, you can jump into our tutorial section and find what corresponds the most to what you would like to do. We got tutorials about stadiums, about battles, about car traffic. So just a check into the documentation to find more about the different tools and how to use Golem. See you in the next video.